Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be breaking down the operations order. We're going to be going through the different parts that each operation order has. We'll go through a little slide deck as well, and hopefully this can be used for any of the leadership in this unit if they want to create more realistic looking OPORDs or kind of get an idea of what a real one will look like. I'm going to be using this one from Echo Company of the 211 Infantry. This is one we use for training, so if you want to get a link to it, I can send it to you. It's a PDF around 18 pages, and you can look through of what a company level OPORD looks like. So let's get started. Before we get into the slide deck, this is just what the actual operation order will look like. The real one, since this is for training, a real one will not have your third platoon. It's kind of like you should know as the PL what platoon you're part of, obviously. But this is what it's going to look like. Now they vary in page ranges. Largest I've seen is around 50. The smallest is around 17 to 18 pages. So it's going to come in this format, just everything just thrown together, like kind of what we've been doing, but it's just all organized in each paragraph. So yeah, there's artillery fires as well on key tasks, and we'll go through a little slide deck here. All right, cool. So an op order is a structured format. So the higher up individuals in this unit, they're going to know what this is. But if you don't know, essentially this is the templated plan. Okay, so it's going to help subordinate units get all the information they need, and it's split up into 5 paragraphs. The first one is going to be your situation. This is going to provide the overview of enemy and friendly forces, terrain, weather, anything that can influence and describe the situation of the mission that you're about to go into. The mission is just a simple statement. It's considered a separate paragraph, one of the 5 paragraphs, but this is not a paragraph. It is a statement that includes the 5 W's, and it is always stated twice. Not written down twice, but when you're verbally giving a brief of an operations order, you will always state it twice. The execution, now this is one that's the nuts and bolts of the mission. This is a step-by-step how this operation is going to be conducted via each unit. And we'll get into that in a bit. It's a statement, so this is going to cover all of the logistics, medical, resupply. The platoon sergeant has a big, heavy hand in this. It is essentially the platoon sergeant's baby and his responsibility to brief during an OPORD brief. But any leadership should understand the sustainment for their operation. And lastly, this is important for the command and signal. It's all your comms procedures. So that's your challenge and password, that's your call signs, succession of command, everything that's going to help you communicate throughout the mission. So every single OPORD is going to have these 5 paragraphs, and they're going to differ in content, but it's always going to be a 5 paragraph, whether it's a brigade level operations order or a squad level operations order. This is the paragraph you're always going to find. Before they even get into the situation, though, the task organization is always given. This is an example of a company level operations order. That's what this slideshow is going to go over, but it all applies to the platoon as well. So what we can see here is the company commander has listed all of the platoons and the HQ elements that are going to be referenced in the operations order. So each platoon is up there, and each squad is represented, as well as the forward observer, the FO, and the medic. The company HQ is going to have 2 60mm mortars, so that is also listed. The way this is read is 1-1E would be first squad of first platoon of Echo Company. Then second squad, first platoon, Echo Company, and then W is weapon squad, or fourth squad. Weapon squad, first platoon, Echo Company. And that's just how it's delineated and written down in the operations order. You have your fire support officer, your company medic, and then as the aforementioned 60mm mortars. As well as the actual operations order, you will also receive an annex packet, is what they call it. And it's just a visual description, more for the quote-unquote visual learners. This is kind of the task org, so to speak, the ORBAT, you can say. And this is what it is. So if the task org is written here, it's just going to be visualized in the next annex. So you'll see first platoon is there, second platoon. Don't worry so much about what the DO and SO1, SO2 means, as well as the chevrons. The chevrons, 2 chevrons indicate that this is going to be the decisive operation, or the platoon or the squad that's going to actually is critical their task is going to be critical to accomplish, and everything else is supporting. So this is the supporting efforts 1 and 2. So yeah, and it shows also the key weapon systems. So we have 2 M240s in this one. There's 2 M240s attached. Since this is a company level, each platoon is going to have 2 240s, obviously. And then the company headquarters here, we can see that we have a 60mm mortar section. So the 2 dots represent a section, 1 dot is a squad, and 3 dots is a platoon, and then 1 vertical bar is a company. And there's also a UAS support, so there's going to be a drone section as well. It's going to be attached to the headquarters. That is up to the company commander to use. So the situation is going to be broken down into multiple different parts. The green ones that are going to be highlighted, or that are going to be in green font, are the ones that I believe apply to ARMA, and the ones in red are going to be the ones that do not apply. So the first one, the very first information you're going to get in the situation is going to be the context. Second one is going to be the area of interest, area of operations, terrain analysis. We use the OPORD format. There's 5 different items, or 5 different sections of terrain analysis. There's obstacles, avenues of approach, key terrain, observation, fields of fire, and cover and concealment. So that is broken down into the acronym OPORD. Weather and its effects does not apply for us. The only thing that would be, I don't know, like if it's nighttime, that would be important to mention for night vision. But generally, rain, cold weather doesn't matter, hot weather doesn't matter. The players actually playing the game don't feel any of that, so it doesn't really need to be included. Enemy composition and disposition, that's what they're composed of and what they're generally doing, or what their plan of action is going to be. Excuse me, and we do that for 2 levels up. We don't need to worry about their warfighting function capabilities. That's a little higher level stuff that we're never going to use, but if you are interested, those are the warfighting functions. They basically break it down, the enemy capabilities, their intelligence, their movement and maneuver, what fires they have, protections they have, like air defense assets, what's their sustainment plan like. Nobody really needs to know that for ARMA. It doesn't really apply for our level. Enemy course of action, that's generally what the enemy is planning on doing for their operation. And their scheme of maneuver is their step-by-step on how they're going to do it. We don't really need to worry about the step-by-step, but having a general course of action the enemy's going to take described is going to be beneficial. And then lastly, the friendly forces mission. So this is going to be your 2 levels up. So if it's a platoon outboarder, you're going to give the company, and then you're going to give the battalion intent, key tasks, and the end state. So everyone's tracking. And so those are the 9 components of the situation. Let's break it down. So these are going to be examples of what the general context would sound like. So in this case, the Alvanian forces are going to be the enemies here. So a possible context would sound like, in the past 120 hours, Alvanian forces have attacked west, seizing the town of Derby as they proceed with their advance towards Columbus. Alvanian forces are attempting to seize the Zeeland oil pipeline that runs through Columbus. And then it describes that specifically the 743rd Airborne, which is the actual unit identifier now of the Alvanian forces, are currently occupying the town of Derby with 1 airborne infantry company forward deployed, 1 infantry company to the east securing roadways, and 1 dedicated to defense. So it's giving you the breakdown of who we're fighting, like what specific unit we're fighting, what the subsections of that unit are doing, and then the context is going to bring our unit in. So, for example, the 183rd Infantry deployed to Fort Benning, or you can say, obviously, wherever the airfield that we're going to be at. We deployed there via wherever within the past 18 hours to prevent their forces from continuing their attack. We're tasked to seize key terrain. So it's talking about the enemy. It's then talking about our mission and our kind of context on how we got here, why we're here. And that's just going to help create the framework for the rest of the order. After you give the general context of the enemy and ourselves, now we're going to go over the area of interest. So area of interest is going to be larger than the area of operations. So the area of interest is all the, like it says here, airways and land areas that are going to pose a potential threat or opportunity to our forces. So we'll just read the example here and then we'll break it down. So area of operations, which in this operation is going to be titled AO Leader, is influenced by the enemy's presence in the south. The enemy has no CAS or rotary wing assets. The enemy will likely commit a reserve platoon located to the south of our AO. Once U.S. forces breach the wire, so this is going to be an attack operation. So once the U.S. forces breach the wire obstacles on Objective Bull, their reserve platoon can reinforce within 60 minutes. The enemy has an ADA system, so that's an anti-air system, on the objective with a range of 6 kilometers. So the area of interest is going to not only include where your element or the unit is going to be operating, but it's what can influence it. So let's say there's a platoon that's outside of the map or outside of our area of operation, way up to the north or way up to the south, that would be included in the area of interest. Anything, if there's resupply points, if there's a drone outpost, if there's anything outside of our area of operations that could have an impact on us, that is what the area of interest is. Now, the area of operations is more specific. It's always cordoned off by north, south, east, and west for the cardinal directions. And in an operation order, it'll tell you usually what the north, south, east, and west borders are going to be. So area of operations is going to be all airways and land areas where ground forces are assembling. So this is going to be where your people are actually going to be moving. Your soldiers might not even touch the area of interest, but they will be in the area of operations, and that's what they're responsible for. Usually there's going to be area of operations to your north and to your south that are going to be the responsibilities of adjacent units, okay? And you got to make sure that we are not going into their area of operations because that could be bad. Friendly fire could happen if we don't communicate well. So each unit is going to get their own area of interest and area of operation. On an operations order, it will pretty much always be delineated by the grid lines. So north and south will be the northings. So in this case, it's going to be the 8-5 grid line and the 8-1 grid line. That's going to be the north and south. Route Simpson, that's going to be in a high-speed avenue of approach, or main supply route. It doesn't have to be. It can also be an easting or a grid line. But in this operation, they're going to say, hey, this road that's running generally north to south is going to be the leftmost limit. So if you cross that road, that's the leftmost limit. The east, in this case, is going to be the 1-8 easting. So it's easier on a map to be able to just cut it up by the grid lines since there's already lines for you. But that's up to you guys. This is going to be an example of what it would look like in one of the annexes. The objective is circled and titled. There's also the routes in black, so if the drawing in Arma Reforger actually works on the map, drawing them out is going to be very helpful, and they're also labeled. Everything is pretty much labeled. Phase lines are labeled, as here as well. Phase lines are going to be introduced whenever a movement formation changes. It triggers an action of some sort. So phase lines aren't there. They shouldn't be used unless they're actually going to trigger a change or something decisive to the operation, like going from bounding Overwatch to traveling Overwatch or vice versa. Or, hey, if we cross this phase line, this is going to be our dismount point. Hey, if we cross this phase line, the mortars are going to end up kicking out. If we cross this phase line, this squad is going to go and set up a support by fire, etc. So these are all different phase lines. And then there's an assault position here, which is kind of like a rally point where everyone goes to get set up before they push up. This is an area of interest, so you can see that the AO is boxed in. AO leader, as we mentioned before. This is boxed in. This is where our troops will generally be fighting and moving. But the area of interest includes all of the adjacent objectives that our sister companies are going to be attacking. So Objective Ant and Objective Crow in this instance, they are going to be adjacent units' responsibilities, but they're still shown in the area of interest because they could affect our operation here. There's also the threat rings, right? So the Type 87, this is an 82mm mortar asset that the enemy has on Objective Bull. It has an 8-kilometer range. Correction, 5.6 kilometer range, so that's circled. Obviously, you don't have to do that on Arma. This is just an example of what it would look like. And then they have their air defense system, threat ring, and the reserves are 45 minutes out. And then you're going to go into the terrain analysis. The first one is going to be obstacles. Now, this can be broken down into natural and man-made. So when you're describing, you don't really need to be super, super in-depth. From my understanding is we're going to be in the woods during winter. So some of this can be pretty applicable. For natural, it talks about dense woods and rolling hills. When you're doing this, you should be describing what obstacles are going to be there. For natural, like I said, dense woods and rolling hills, but also you need to kind of say, hey, what is this actually going to do? How does this actually affect us? And that's when the second part comes in. So it's going to prevent mounted movement throughout most of the AO. So this doesn't need to be paragraphs of info. It just needs to be maybe like 2-3 sentences per critical natural obstacle. So if there's a shit ton of trees and forests, hey, dense woods. How is that going to affect us? It's going to prevent mounted movement. It's going to force us to do X. It's going to force us to do Y, etc. You can also get really descriptive if you want, saying units may move in a column or wedge, but will likely determine a file formation is required for hours of limited visibility. You can also mention there's creeks and tributaries that run north and south. It's going to restrict movement. It's going to force dismounted movement, etc. After you describe the kind of the natural obstacles that we're going to face while we're moving around in the AO, we're going to talk about man-made. So if we're doing an attack on an enemy who's been preparing, in this case for 120 hours, this is when we describe the obstacles that they have placed that aren't natural. For example, triple strand sea wire, or sandbags, or bunkers. This is when you're going to start AP mines as well, because apparently that's the new hot thing now. Anti-personnel mines would definitely be mentioned here. Yeah. And then it says here, ample time to construct primary battle positions. So anything that the enemy's done to stop us from moving around or on their objective that we're going to, it should be mentioned. Next is going to be avenues of approach. So this is more complicated. You probably don't really need to add it so much, but in a real operations order, it's going to list out a whole bunch of avenues of approach. Route Simpson, example, like this avenue of approach 1 could be like an MSR. Let's see if I can actually, well, I'll do that after. It's kind of hard to explain, but generally, let's say you have an objective that we're going to, objective bull, any of the roads, I'll actually go back, any of the roads, Route Vive, Route Simpson, that's leading into the objective would be probably considered an avenue of approach. This is you just looking at the map and being like, the enemy's to the east, this road coming down from north to south here is going to be an avenue of approach. Let's label that. Oh, this is another pretty high-speed avenue of approach. They're probably going to come through here, go north into the objective. And I'll show you a picture of what that's supposed to look like. But usually all those are labeled, and then they're described. Like, hey, this road right here, this AOA, Avenue of Approach 1, can support a mounted platoon in a staggered column at 50 kilometers an hour. So they can get there pretty quick. And then describe the mounted ones, and there could be dismounted ones. The normal rate of march for a dismounted platoon is going to be around 3 kilometers an hour. That's in bright day with minimal interference. If it's nighttime and there's fog, if you're in a file going slow and tired, it's probably going to be around 1 kilometer an hour or less. So, avenues of approach, boom, key terrain. Now, key terrain is important because the infantry, our job is to control and seize key terrain, okay? Killing people is just part of the job in seizing that key terrain. Anything that's important to us, this can be an intersection, this can be a hill, this can be infrastructure. Anything that is deemed key terrain should be listed here. In this example, there's going to be one piece of key terrain. It's going to be the hill, Bush Hill, which is the objective of this operation. It gives the grid and the why. Why is this key terrain? It is a dominating piece of terrain that provides overwhelming fields of fire to whoever combatant controls it. That is why it's key. That is why it's our job to seize it. And then you can list that if you can have up to 2, 3, 4 key terrains, as long as they make sense. Next one is going to be your observation and fields of fire. This is going to be kind of similar to the first one, but this is just these dense woods. We mentioned it for the obstacles as well, but it's also not only an obstacle for movement, it's an obstacle to our observation of the enemy. So they're going to limit that observation to approximately 150 to 200 meters, and then 50 meters during nighttime, even with night vision. So if we're doing an operation at night, definitely important to mention, hey, this is going to be a pretty limited observation. And you can repeat that for any others that you want. Last one is going to be cover and concealment, similar. So the dense woods are going to limit the movement, they're going to limit the observation, but they're also going to act as cover and concealment. So it's important to include in the last part as well. So they provide cover from 556, 762 throughout the AO. Also, there's going to be a lot of thick underbrush, rocks. I know our map we're probably going to use is going to be pretty rocky. So that's going to be able to provide cover for personnel on a knee or prone throughout the AO. And that is the last thing for terrain analysis. You just go through that acronym, you touch on all that shit that's going to be utilized, keep it focused inside the AO. Don't try to go on every single area throughout the map. Don't give yourself more work than you have to. And just describe those 5 things, and it's going to help. Additionally, wood lines are going to provide cover and concealment within approximately 300 meters of the objective, which means 300 meters out we're going to be pretty good, but any closer than that, we're going to start going into the open. There's minimal cover and concealment in the vicinity of the objective. The area is generally open, so this is just when you describe on the objective, the cover and concealment. Okay. Next is going to be, this is the GTAO overlay, or the graphic terrain analysis overlay. This is what the S2 is going to put together. Usually in the annex packet, S2 is doing a lot of this heavy lifting. This is the AOAs actually established here. You'll see there's 3 friendlies on the left, 2 enemies on the right. We don't need to make this for every single operation that we do. That's not the expectation here. This is just an example of what an S2 would kind of put together. The obstacles are listed here. Every single acronym, or every single letter of that acronym, is represented here. From the obstacles in green, you'll see there's sea wire, anti-tank ditches, and there's anti-tank mines as well on the road. There's the avenues of approach here. There's all of the creeks and vegetation. This is just what it would look like. Next, we're going to go over the enemy forces. Again, we're still in situation. In the Army, we analyze the enemy forces and their course of action and scheme of maneuver first. Say, hey, this is what we think the enemy is going to do, and then we build our plan off of what we believe the enemy is most likely to do. When you describe the enemy forces, you only really need a couple things. Give their general composition, like, hey, our battalion, our platoon, our squad, our company, whatever, is facing this specific enemy unit, what they're comprised of. So in this case, we're going against a company that's comprised of 3 infantry platoons. Excuse me. Each platoon has 24 personnel. It has an HQ section. It has a mortar section. And you just give the general breakdown. You give the strength, simple strength statement. Hey, they're going to be at around 93%. They're going to be at 70%. Hey, they just got their ass kicked by an adjacent unit. They're going to be at 50%. So you take whatever the normal composition of that would be. Like, hey, normally on paper, there's 50 personnel per platoon, but it's at 50% strength, so we're probably going to be around 25 per platoon. So that's just some critical thinking we got to do. Then the general disposition, 1 and 2 levels up. This is just what their 2 levels up is tasked with doing, and what their 1 level up is tasked with doing. So in this case, let's say 2 levels up would be a company for these guys. So if we're going against a squad, their company is tasked with securing a town as they prepare their advance north. Hey, if their company's doing that, well, the platoons are going to be doing this. And it's just situational awareness as the platoon leader you want to give to your people. And you can just kind of get creative with it. This is an example of what the 2 levels up would be. So this is their companies are all scattered over here. They have their task and their purpose to disrupt or to block. And then their 1 level up would be the platoons. So the platoon is either fixing or disrupting, blocking, etc. This is their composition. So hey, we're going against this platoon. This is what we believe their squads are going to consist of. And it lists out their weapon systems, their task and their purpose of each squad here, and then of the overall platoon. And the PAX count. This is a high value target, which is why it's highlighted in red, a type 73. So if they have a critical weapon system that's going to screw us up, or we have to put extra emphasis on, highlighted in red, high value target, boom. Next is their course of action statement. This is simply how the specific unit we are fighting is going to conduct their operation. So if they're going to be a defense, this is how they're going to do that defense. So this is the purpose of it, how they're going to accomplish it, and what's decisive to it. So in this case, the purpose of the enemy's operation is to allow their forces to consolidate for future operations. They will accomplish this by conducting an area defense. Decisive to the operation is the destruction of 2 U.S. IFVs along the designated route. And it is decisive because it will delay the U.S. forces' advance and allow the enemy forces to mass combat power on the objective. Simple course of action statement. It doesn't need to be too specific. That's where the enemy scheme of maneuver would go. That's where you would just go step by step what each squad is going to do, where they're going to move, all that bullshit. That's too in depth. No one's going to read that shit. No one's probably going to read this shit anyway, but it's important to know when to kind of stop when we're going too much in depth. Just give a general course of action what the enemy's going to do. Then this is their task org. So that we're going against our platoon is going against an enemy platoon, or our company's going against an enemy platoon, and it just lists out the enemy squads. Their first squad, their third squad, second squad, task and purpose. This is what the S2 would kind of cook up. That's what they believe the enemy is going to do. Again, we do not have to worry about this. You do not have to create this. That's not the expectation here. But This is just, hey, their phase lines are probably going to be here. The UAS assets are probably going to be positioned here. This are going to be their key weapon systems that they're going to in place. These are the battle position areas, using UAV, using all this information that you've received. This is their probable kill zone. You're basically saying, if I was in their situation, what would I do? And knowing how the enemy fights, because not every single enemy in the world fights like the United States. So understanding their tactics is going to be pretty important to developing this. And their obstacles are going to be here, kill zones, their MELs, the maximum engagement line. Again, don't have to stress too much on this, but this is just what we develop before we even make our own plan. What the enemy might do, and then we'll plan off of that. Next, you're going to talk about the friendly forces. So if this is a company level OPORD, 2 levels up would be a brigade. So you would give their mission, their key tasks, and their end state. So the brigade attacks at this time to seize key terrain in this area in order to whatever. In this case, it's pass another brigade through so they can capture the town. The key tasks are going to be disrupting enemy from the north, rapidly seizing key terrain, secure a route for the passage of friendly forces, and then end state are usually touched in 3 components: the terrain, the enemy, and then civil infrastructure. So usually the terrain is going to be just control the terrain. We're going to conduct an attack, so the end state here is that we control the terrain we're actually attacking. And the enemy, higher level up, is going to be much more strategical. In this case, for the brigade, it's the enemy is unable to influence the passage of the 25th ID, so they're unable to do anything about it, essentially. Civil is going to be restore the international border. That's the brigade's highest level mission for the civil. The end state, the international border is restored after this operation. And then this is the same thing. It lays out the friendly battalions here. The battalion commander, so this is going to be the 1 level up from the company operations order. It gives the battalion mission. This starts to get more and more specific the lower you go down. So the mission is going to be, now we have an actual objective. We're going to seize this key terrain on Bush Hill, and so we can allow the passage. So it's the same in order to, but the actual task gets a bit more precise the lower you go down, more specific. The key tasks are going to be super similar to the previous one, to the brigade. We're going to disrupt the enemy counterattack still. We're going to control key terrain, and we're going to deny enemy forces the use of that key terrain. The end state is going to be, the enemy is going to be destroyed on the objective. The key terrain is going to be seized, and then the MSRs remain trafficable for the Striker Brigade combat team that's going to come through after us. And then this is their annex. It's the same thing, what each unit is going to do and where. And then here is the actual company commander's mission. So you'll see it's very, very similar. So we're securing key terrain still as a key task. We're seizing the objective. We're controlling the route to the objective and through the objective. And then the end state is going to be, it's always going to be destroyed in the objective. Friendlies, in this case, we're going to occupy a hasty defense and prepare for follow-on operations. And then civil and terrain, it's cleared of obstacles and prepared to pass the Striker Brigade combat team. Boom, that was situation done. Next, we're going to go through mission. The mission is literally a simple statement. That's all. It doesn't have to get any more complicated than that. It's a who, what, where, when, and why. For example of the company operations order, this is going to be the 183rd Infantry attacks to seize. That's the task. Objective shack in vicinity of whatever grid. No later than, this is a date time group. So this was yesterday's date because I gave the class yesterday. Oh, shit. I'm stupid. I gave the class yesterday, so 07 November 25, but nested between the 07 and November is going to be the time. So by 0700 on 7 November 25, that's when the operation needs to be completed. We will have seized that objective by 0700. In order to allow passage of another infantry division infantry battalion toward an objective. And then this is broken down. So the who, the 183rd, what, attacks to seize, where, the objective and grid, when, no later than that date time group, and why, in order to allow passage of the 211th Infantry toward Derby. That's all it is. That is the entire paragraph. And you repeat that twice. If it's a platoon operations order, it will be first platoon, attacks to seize, blah, 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 no later than blah, blah, in order to do whatever the company's trying to do. This is the little science behind them. Task and purpose, so there are clear tasks and clear purposes. So you're going to do X in order to accomplish Y. The X can have 3 different orientations. It can be based on the enemy, the terrain, or friendlies. Common examples, you'll see the bottom right is going to be the mission statement that we just received from the company commander. This one is an attack to seize. So an attack is enemy oriented, but since we're seizing, it's ultimately going to be terrain. So there's a list at the bottom, or the left, of what you can do in terms of the enemy. You can attack. So let's say the 183rd is going to conduct an attack, is going to block, is going to destroy, disrupt, is going to fix the enemy. Infantry is going to support by fire, blah, 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 blah. And then in order to, in this case, at the bottom right, is allow the passage of another unit, but it could be in order to prevent the enemy from encircling the battalion, in order to preserve combat power, in order to locate and destroy an enemy supply cache, in order to provide early warning for the brigade. It can be so many different things, but when you're doing a task and purpose and doing a mission statement, it needs to be in this format. It needs to have these keywords for the X and the Y, and then you can just get creative with the rest of it. But this gives the context and the important why behind why we're doing this operation. Now this is going to be the nuts and bolts. This is execution. So just like last time, there's going to be a couple of subjects that we're really not going to touch on that are kind of pointless, but some that I think should be included. Concept of the operation and the phases, that's going to be touched on later, not as important. Schema maneuver is going to be the actual bread and butter. So the schema maneuver is going to kind of incorporate the concept of the operation, but be a little bit more specific. Don't need to worry about schema fires. We don't have any indirect fire assets, which fucking sucks, but that's a conversation for another day. The TT loadout is going to be just a list of all the different fire commands and fire missions that you have. We don't use it, so we're not going to use it. Tasks to subordinate units. This is important, so the company commander should be giving very specific tasks to each platoon, and we'll touch on that later. The coordinating instructions are important. The CCIRs are going to be important as well. They're not really going to affect the mission per se because not a lot of them usually happen, but we'll get into that. The timeline is super important. Priority of rehearsals can be, and we'll touch on that. But those are the 9 different aspects of the execution paragraph. Schema maneuver. So generally, when you're going to be making an OPORD and you're going to be describing how we're going to actually accomplish the mission that you just set up in the previous couple sections, you want to give it by phase. So, hey, this operation is going to occur in 4 phases. The most standard model is going to be the 4-phase model. This is what most of the operation orders are going to be consisting of. You can have up to 6, up to 7 if you want. Any more than that is just too much. But this is the standard one. Phase 1 is always going to be planning and preparation. Phase 2 is always going to be the movement. 3 is usually the actions on. And 4 is consolidation and reorganization. Those are the standard phases. So we'll start with the first one. So in these little statements, what you'll lay out is you'll be like, hey, phase 1, you're going to say what it begins with and what it ends with. 99% of the time, it's going to be the same. It's going to begin with the receipt of the mission, and it's going to end when we actually leave the tactical assembly area, or the TAA, and then it's going to have the critical aspects of this phase execution. So in this case, it's going to begin with the receipt of the OPORD, and when the company SPs from TAA Nate, and critical to this phase is going to be executing a company combined arms rehearsal and platoon rehearsals, as well as PCCs and PCIs. So just literally what needs to be done in order for that phase to be considered a success. Second one is going to be the movement. What you'll notice here is that whatever the previous phase ended with, it is exactly the same as what the next phase starts with. So phase 1 ended when the company left TAA Nate, and phase 2 is going to begin when the company leaves TAA Nate. So there's no in-between space. Everything is accounted for. It's going to end when the company is staged at an operational rally point. Critical to this phase is going to be the mounted movement, the tactical dismount, and then the dismounted movement to the organizational rally point, or the ORP, or operational rally point, rather. And then phase 3 is going to be the actions on, or the seizure of the objective that we're going for. It's going to begin with whatever the last phase ended with, and then it's going to end when the objective is actually seized or that mission is accomplished, whatever you want to say. And then critical to this phase, it can vary between whatever the mission is going to be, and then the last one is always going to be consolidation, reorganization. It's going to begin with whatever the last one ended with, and its critical is going to be whatever establishment of hasty battle positions, establishment of resupply operations, conduction of CCP operations, medical evacuations, whatever you want to say. But this is the standard model right here. 4 phases. So this is just examples, little quotes that I've pulled from a company op order that can kind of give you an idea. So after you describe what each phase was generally, begins with, ends with, what's critical to it, this is when you start moving into, hey, by phase. In this case, I started with phase 2 because that's usually when you start talking about specifics. Phase 1 is always just prep, but phase 2 is an example is, hey, the company's gonna SP from the assembly area Nate in this order of movement, going to this position, occupying from this area to this area. Next, this company's going to wait for F and G company to seize their objectives, so then we can move. At the bottom, it talks about it. We're going to move along this route for this distance to the first checkpoint. We'll continue going this direction at this speed. It's just literally these step by step. Like if you close your eyes and you just walk through the mission, that's what you're doing. You're giving a step-by-step guide. A company can be more generalized. They can say, hey, this platoon is going to do this. But the platoon one needs to be, hey, each squad, when we're moving, this is what we're going to do. Each person we're going to have this squad mount up here. This squad is going to mount up in this vehicle. Third squad is going to be on a third truck. Fourth squad is going to be fourth truck, or maybe 2 squads are going to be in one. We're going to travel this distance, this direction until we reach checkpoint 1. We're then going to go this distance, this direction to checkpoint 2. And you're literally step by step the entire operation. We're going to dismount here. We're going to go in this order of movement. We're going to have first squad first, then second squad, third squad, and fourth squad. We're going to move 800 meters at approximately this azimuth to our assault position. At our assault position, we're going to conduct MWE, or men, weapon, and equipment checks. We're going to make sure to do our final PCCs, and you literally go through it, the entire thing. It's going to take a while, but if you plan it out here, if you plan how the entire operation is going to go in a perfect world, then once you get into the game, you're going to be like, okay, let's just execute the plan. We don't have to wing it. We don't have to guess. We just execute the plan, and if something goes wrong, we just adjust off of it. We have a baseline, we'll just adjust. Platoon level, an example for a phase 3 is, hey, like actions on have started. Support by fire is going to establish. Once that happens, first squad is going to move up to phase line Alabama. Once the enemy is suppressed between these TRPs by support by fire, that will allow second squad to be able to move up online with them. At phase line California, once we move to phase line California, support by fire will cease fire, which will allow second squad to move up, then seize objective steer. At this point, the platoon has achieved a decisive point. Once second squad crosses the same phase line, first squad will move up to phase line Alabama. So you're just going through, like I said before, step by step. You went to the movement, now you're in the actual actions on, what each squad is going to do. They're going to get online, they're going to suppress, they're going to shift fire here, we're going to go to this phase line. You just walk us through it. This is kind of an example of what an operations overlay would look like, the step-by-step kind of guide, where let's say you don't have time to read it out, or you're reading it as well, you would also be referencing the annexes while you're reading it. So this kind of literally gives you the step-by-step of what we're going to do. We're going to go to a vehicle dismount point once we reach phase line Astros. We know we've arrived. Then we're going to go along this axis till we reach our rally point. Then we're going to go through this axis to our assault position. And then we're going to move north along this direction of advance, or DOA, up to the objective. And then it lists out everything. These are 3 different platoons, but you don't need to worry about a company level. Unless you want to have, hey, Lancer's going to take this, Nightmare's going to take this one. And there's different phase lines as well to kind of coordinate that. This is the same thing, but it's a course of action sketch. It's the same thing, just without the terrain involved. Don't need to worry about that, but it shows each checkpoint, the route, and then each phase of the operation, phase 1, 2, 3, etc. Tasks to subordinate units. So this is very important. So let's say we have 2 platoons, which we normally do. Nightmare and Lancer would each have their own tasks, and if they're working on 2 different objectives. In this case, 3rd platoon's tasks are going to be conducting final preparations inside the TAA prior to departing for the attack position. They need to seize the objective that they're tasked to seize, and then be prepared to conduct a breach on it, and then establish defensive position. So these are no-fail tasks that the platoon needs to accomplish in order for the mission to be considered a success. So they need to be their own section, and actually listed. Boom, boom, boom. And then these are the CCIRs. So there's 3 different categories. Super, super simple. The first one is going to be the PIRs, or what we want to know about the enemy. So the important information that will make our fight a little bit easier. Location of their weapons, their mortars, their caches, their mounted assets. What is the location, composition, and disposition of the reserve element? So if we find this information during any phase of our operation, we got to push this up to command. The second one is going to be the FFIR, or the Friendly Force Information Requirements. This is what the commander needs to know if it happens. If we lose a squad, report it up. If we lose a key leader, report it up. A cruiser weapon, report it up. And this also might change how we conduct the operation. If we lose an entire squad, our scheme of maneuver or our course of action might change. So this is this thing, if they happen, they need to be reported up. And the last one is going to be the EEFI, the Essential Elements of Friendly Information. So if the enemy knows this, it will severely endanger us. So if they figure out where our platoon HQ element is, that's going to endanger us. If they know where the company decisive operation is, so like which platoon is actually going to be doing the decisive operation, it's going to endanger us. If they know our staging point or our dismount point, that's going to give them an advantage. So these should be listed in the operations order, and just things to keep in the back of your mind. Timeline. This is super important. So the timeline needs to be given out in the operations order. This means like load into the server this time, get your kits on this time, briefing starts at this time, rehearsals are going to be conducted at this time. We're going to SP, like we are no shit leaving at this time, so be ready here. This is going to allow the subordinate leaders to plan around yours and create their own individual timelines. So if you give them like a 10-minute gap between your times, that gives them time to conduct their own rehearsals and conduct their own movements. And generally it goes from whenever the OPORD is issued all the way until the last key task is completed. So in this case, objective pool is seized, and that's when it's going to end. So give that in the operations order so subordinate leaders can make their own timelines based off yours, and nest it with yours as well. Rehearsals. There's different types of rehearsals that we can do. It's hard to do a rehearsal if you don't know the operation before. So if you plan these operations prior to actually getting in to the server, if you already know what we're going to do before we even load in, it's going to be able to give time for us to rehearse. So 2 easy ones that we can do really, really quickly are confirmation briefs and back briefs. So your confirmation brief is going to be a subordinate leader briefing the higher commander to confirm their understanding. So let's say the company commander says, hey, this is the mission, platoon leader, I want you to give me a confirmation brief and basically restate what I stated to you, just so I know and can confirm that you're understanding what I said. And then the back brief is going to be a subordinate commander explains to their higher commander how they plan to accomplish their mission. So let's say, hey, Nightmare Platoon, I need you to attack this mission. Or, I'm stupid. I need you to attack this objective. I need you to back brief me on your plan in 30 minutes. Okay, 30 minutes goes by. Hey, sir, so I understand this is the mission, and this is how I'm going to execute it. I'm going to put my sport by fire here, and I'm going to walk through my entire plan to accomplish that mission. So you're just back briefing on your course of action and your commander is going to be like, okay, cool. You're right on money, or hey, that's actually wrong. You need to change this. Another one which would be really cool to implement would be a key leader rehearsal. That's literally the platoon leadership coming together and walking through their entire plan. Maybe someone didn't have time to read the OPORD because fuck reading, I guess. And then they just go through the PL's like, hey guys, me and the PSG are going to walk you through. Hey, squad leader, talk to me about your part in this plan. Hey, squad leader, what are you going to do at this phase line? Just kind of like a quizzing. And then they work together to either alter the plan, confirm the plan, or to execute the plan. And then the battle drill rehearsal. These are depicted the above, so the 1, 2, and 3 above. So if we're going to be conducting a breach, hey, the first priority rehearsals is going to be, hey, practice breaching. We're going to get the engineers over here, and they're going to teach you guys how to breach an obstacle. Excuse me. Second one, the priority is going to be react to contact. Hey, we might take contact on the way, so it's probably important to rehearse it quickly, a little verbal rehearsal. And then the last one, platoon attack. These are given by the company commander, and then the platoon just kind of says, okay, cool, this is what the company commander wants us to rehearse, we're going to do it. Alright, second to last paragraph is going to be sustainment. So a couple parts, concept of support, don't really need to worry about. Supply, transportation, it's just pretty much a statement of how we're going to get transported there, whether it's between a UH-60 or vehicles. Classes, we don't have to worry about that. We don't eat MREs in the game or anything. Medical treatment, this is like the evacuation plan. The pickup locations, your HLZ, CCPs, AXPs, etc. And then personnel we'll touch on. So transportation section could be as simple as, hey, we have 4, in this case it's 4 times LMTVs are available per platoon. Some coordinating instructions here are cross-load between platoons as necessary. We do that all the time with the Blackhawks. Hey, we're going to have 4 times UH-60s available for this operation. Nightmare is going to take these ones. Lancer is going to take these ones. Hey, cross-load if necessary. We've already do that pretty well, but this is just the written in stone, no shit in the operations order. So before I even load into the server, I know, hey, we're taking helicopters in. I already know which helicopter I'm going to. And that can be broken down too by the platoon leader. Hey, first and second squad, first one, third and fourth, second one. Simple as that. Medical, so there's going to be the location of the battalion made aid station. For ARMA instances, it's going to be whatever the air base that we're located at, whatever base we like start from, that's probably going to be the evacuation point if we even start doing medical evacuations. Then just give a list of all the CCP locations. So as the company commander, you look on the map, you give 2 to 3 good CCP locations that changed throughout each phase. And then an ambulatory exchange point where a vehicle can come and pick you up if needed. And then a primary and alternate LZ where a helicopter can either resupply or conduct a medical evacuation. These can be done in the moment like we've been doing it, but it's important if we already have at least 2 LZs predetermined that will act as the primary resupply point, so we already know, and air can also track. Personnel, there's a lot of stuff that goes into personnel, but the one that really applies to us is going to be the EPW plan, so the enemy prisoner of wars. This is just coordinating instructions on what to do with them. In this case, it's evacuate them to the collection point on the specific objective for collection by the battalion trains. So people are going to come by, battalion is going to come by to pick them up, radio up, and you can give just a general what to do in this situation. The last paragraph is going to be the command and signal. So this is going to comprise of the location of the commanders by phase, the succession of command, radio frequencies, and then challenge and password and number combination if we choose to use it. So each phase is going to be listed out here. Like, hey, E6 in this case is the company commander, E7 is going to be the first sergeant, and E5 is the XO. So the company's like, hey, we're generally going to be located at the TAA. In phase 1, phase 2, we're going to be between Lancer and Nightmare, or with Lancer or with Nightmare. Phase 3, we're going to be, use rinse and repeat through each phase. So it gives the platoon leader kind of an understanding of, hey, if I need the company commander, this is generally where they're going to be. And also the succession of command is super important as well. If the company commander goes down, it's who's going to be in charge of the company. So in this case, it's the commander, then XO, then first sergeant, or correction, company commander, XO, first platoon leader, second platoon leader, third platoon leader, and then after all the officers have been killed off, then it comes down to the first sergeant. And the platoon example of this would be the platoon leader, the platoon sergeant, weapons squad leader, since he's the second most experienced NCO in the platoon, and then first, second, third squad leader. That's the usual default, so to speak, succession of command, and then the numbers are just their call signs, so it would be 6, 7, 4, 1, 2, 3. Frequencies, literally this is just simple. We already do this pretty well. There's really no change we have to do here. Don't worry about the radio preset. That's real life shit that I forgot to change. So just list the company freak, list the different platoon freaks that Nightmare and Lancer are going to run off, and then the primary, and then just an alternate. If the radios don't work, if the Russians are going to be jamming our equipment, then we need to have an alternate. Since we're going to be clearing trenches, it's probably important to have a challenge and a password. So this is, hey, if I say this word, you need to respond with this specific word so I know that you're friendly. It's going to get pretty confusing when we're clearing or at nighttime. So if we just create a challenge and password that changes for each operation, or since we're going against AI and we can't speak to them and they won't learn it, we can just keep it the same. And then if you want to do a number combination as well, you can. That's like, hey, if the number is 7, if I say 4, you have to say 3. You have to add to whatever number that I gave so we can equal the actual official number combination. That's probably not at our level, so we should probably just focus on the challenge and password. And the company commander will dictate that. And that is it. That is the OPORD. Again, it is given in this kind of format, the same. I can send this out as well. It's all this information. You can choose to take this and just work off of it. This is an example of a more in-depth timeline for the company, and that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, just let me know. I can feel free to describe anything more in depth. And yeah, hope you learned something.